But what shocks me the most, one letter can rip an entire community apart.
I think what the letter did, it revealed just how little regard the Muslim community has been given in this country.
Oh, definitely.
So arguably what the letter, gave light to is that when the Muslim community is questioned, it's not going to be regarded in the same way as another community may be questioned. Yeah. And so the thing for us to remember now is the lessons for us going forward is what are we going to do now? Because we were professionals, we did everything properly, and I stupidly thought to myself, I remember when it first happened, the letters came about, articles came about, and I thought, I've been doing everything properly. I've got nothing to worry about. Yeah. I remember telling another colleague, what are you worried about? Yeah. We've been doing everything properly.
Yeah.
What I was naive about was just how much racism and Islamophobia there is in this country.
Yeah.
And this in itself, if people are under any illusion that you are accepted here, it's time to wake up.
Yeah. We were enhancing, children's life opportunities.
Yeah.
I would say I think the figure is almost 50% of Pakistani children in this country grew up in poverty. And what poverty does, it keeps you trapped in a generational kind of, it's a generational trap. It's just the same thing over and over again. So, and I found that as soon as we, high-performing individuals like ourselves at the leadership level, trying to bring about change, it was seen as suspicion. Why? Because we're Muslim. And it's remarkable that in the 21st century, we're doing the most amount of positive public service, yet we are seen as the other.
You've listened to the podcast. Well, you listened twice to the podcast.
Yes, I have, yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Shocking. Honestly, it was... I must commend, Hamza Saeed and Brian Reid for their brilliant effort to bring it to the fore again. I was shocked, but I wasn't surprised as well, because we've lived it. We were living that nightmare, and we still are living it. I'm still living it, So when Brian and Hamza exposed and, went further and researched it, it just really, it was beyond belief. The balance of probabilities and bringing everything together, it's on a fake letter, on a document, so much damage is done to a community, a brilliant, thriving community, I'm honestly, I'm speechless, because what that letter did, it became the biggest scandal in the history of education in this country. Never have we seen a community more damaged, more marginalised, more stigmatised, more ostracised than that Trojan Horse era, and it what and for it to remain unchallenged, it's unacceptable. And I think what Hamza and what the podcast did, there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered, and there's a lot of unaccountability. So there are people in government at the national level, at the local level, and at the school level that do need to be held accountable. A lot of lives have been damaged, schools have been damaged, the sustainability programs that we were putting in, have been drawn back, performances of children have dipped, careers have been ruined, lives have been ruined, communities been damaged. We're trying to help our community thrive and grow, but it's become fractured again, and it becomes very difficult to keep rebuilding your community, so I think it's time for this to come back to the surface, and an inquiry. We need an inquiry.
Yeah, listening to the podcast was quite difficult at times. Listening and hearing the story being retold, but in a way that hasn't been done so far, was vindicating in one way, but it did bring up so much pain as well, unsettled pain about why this was done to us. But I'm hopeful. I think it's left me very much hopeful as to what we can potentially do from the messages that came out from the podcast.
Did you feel it was the best piece of journalism that's been done so far?
Hands down. I think in terms of this particular podcast, arguably probably the only real thorough investigative journalism into the whole subject itself of Trojan Horse affair. And I'd say that these journalists, aside from some of the Guardian journalists and perhaps one BBC journalist, were very sincere. Up until now, I hadn't really met a sincere journalist who wanted to know the truth of the story. And so when they were asking us questions about things, I didn't feel like we're going to get caught out. I actually felt they wanted to know what the depth of the story was. And you can see it, you can hear it in the actual podcast itself.
But the vast majority of British journalists went along with the overarching narrative. Why do you think they did that?
I think Islamophobia runs rife in the establishment. There's no doubt about it. Nobody really cares about how Muslims think, and that we have differences, that we all come from different places. There was an idea that the big bad Muslim boogeyman is up to no good, and we were tarnished with the same brush.
Roshan, it was hard. It evoked a lot of emotion. There hasn't been closure. The emotions are still real. The wounds haven't healed. And listening to all of that and how the government colluded, how the council colluded, how irresponsible certain key people were within the council, within the government, and how we were just treated like crap and we were just a pawn in this bigger scheme of things, and how my life and the life of my colleagues was ruined and nobody gave a damn about anything. The impact on us, the impact that we are still facing, and the suffering is still real today. It was horrible, I'll be honest with you. It was traumatic. I started suffering from headaches, and the last 2-3 days has been really tense for me. A lot of people have approached me, wanted to speak to me, get a story, etc. And it's been difficult, I'll be honest with you. I've not been able to focus on my work and family, etc., because this has really been on the forefront of my mind. It's been hard listening to it. It's refreshing, don't get me wrong. I'm glad that people can now understand and are exposed to the reality of what happened. But for me, it was difficult to listen to all of that because I was caught in the middle of it, embroiled in the thick of things, and being a victim of an Islamophobic agenda, and just finding out the real facts behind this made it very painful for me. I'm really angry. There's lots of different emotions. There's mixed emotions. I'm happy this podcast has come out, but I'm angry at the same time that justice still hasn't been served, to be honest with you.
This is impossible to answer briefly, but as succinctly as you possibly can you just tell me what happened to you?
So I was the deputy head. I was appointed as the deputy head of Old Know Academy in April 2013. I was the substantive deputy head. Things were going really well. And then in January 2014, the head teacher leaves the school for whatever reasons, and Old Know Academy, within a few weeks after that, in about March 2014, we got dragged into Trojan Horse. And after that was it. We were under heavy government scrutiny. We were inspected by the Education Funding Agency. We were inspected by Ofsted. The reports were very damning. As a result of that, the governors had to, resign. The school changed name. It was a different trust that took over, and I eventually lost my job. And
you were banned for life.
I was banned for life. Yeah. So
I read an article from the Guardian. You were basically accused of trying to Islamize the school, right?
Yeah, that's
and
right. Yeah.
There were certain incidents that were mentioned. You were accused of trying to ban Christmas and Diwali and generally kind of get people in who are like-minded and get rid of people who weren't like-minded. What would you say to that, Jahangir?
No, none of that was true. It's all uncontextual. You know, the EFA, just like with the EFA report, the Peter Clark report, the Ian Kershaw report, the Ofsted report, everything was cherry-picked, you know, and unfortunately I just found myself in a very toxic environment at the time. I didn't, you know, all these allegations that were levied at me, one of the reasons why I fought it so well was because my legal team and my union had convinced me that you've done nothing wrong. So hence, you know, the confidence. So, you know, I did nothing wrong and I'm still trying to find ways to clear my name. You know, the ban is almost kind of over. I can reapply, but I'm not going to do that until I clear my name, you know. So, and a lot of these issues about Christmas and about Diwali, you know, in my statement, which I'm willing to make public, you know, it's all been, you know, clarified what happened, what the reasons were behind it. We had Christmas, we did celebrate Diwali, you know, we've always done these things. But I was at that school only for a few months and I was the deputy head. Surely, you know, if there's any cancellations of anything, you know, we should put this to the head teacher as well, you know. So it was a very Islamophobic attempt, you know, to bring me down and, you know, just blame everything on the Muslim. I think that was just the culture that it was at the time.
One day we all hear about some letter roaming around suggesting that there's some sort of plot to take over schools and Islamize them. And initially, I myself regarded it as just a hoax or a joke. And when it came about in an article and some right-wing journalist picked it up, my initial response was again that this will be rubbished very quickly. But when articles upon articles came out, I soon realized that there's something very sinister that's happening here. The trauma that it was inducing, this was, you know, teaching was a career, a passion, you know, for myself. I was a deputy head of a state primary school, one of the largest primary schools in Europe, in fact, Nansen Primary School. And, you know, we were improving the results in that school year on year. We had made improvements, improvements in teaching, improvements in quality of learning, behavior, etc. But when this letter came about, it was making one sweeping comment that the teachers, myself included, had ulterior motives, that we wanted to somehow make these children into some sort of extremists. And so we were on the back foot, myself included. Towards the end of the year, we were suspended because of the repeated investigations that took place. Some of you will know that there were 5, 6, 7 investigations happening from Ofsted, from the NCTL, from the Education Funding Agency, from Price Waterhouse, from the auditors. Then there was the Peter Clark investigation, then the local authority, Ian Kershaw's investigation. Several investigations were happening all at the same time, and some prolonged, all the way up to 2.5 to 3 years. We were sacked, many of us, myself included, and then we were essentially just, taken through like we were some animals in a zoo through the NCTL hearing, where one day here, one day there, we were told to turn up and answer questions and hear representations from people who were lying against us. And eventually it transpired that there was a breach of process, resulting in the entire case falling apart. But the interesting thing is that the entire thing began based on this letter, which was a hoax, unsigned, undated, incomplete itself. It wasn't even the original letter, without which none of this would have actually transpired. And, the shocking thing was that the hearing that we had, which was intended to strip us of our license to teach, essentially, the beginning of that investigation, of the tribunal, said that this is really not answering the letter. This is about something else. This is about how these teachers were, presenting a form of Islam that was not conducive to British values.
What is your situation now? Are you banned from teaching or not?
No, the entire case was dropped, so perfectly fine to go and teach. Unfortunately, I can't physically.
Could you get a job though?
Yeah, I can get a job as a teacher, but I can't emotionally connect with the notion of teaching again. It's way too painful for me.
I mean, looking back on it, do you regret anything? I mean, I'm not sure whether you want to talk about this or not, but the WhatsApp group and the accusations, the homophobia, etc., that you were accused of, and I think you were sacked for that, right?
Yeah.
Looking back on it, do you regret anything?
So I regret the comments. I think in terms of the comments hurt people, and they shouldn't have been said. And I think in terms of the position that I have as a person individually, just in terms of in society, it's unfair to support those comments in any shape or form. I think in terms of there's a responsibility we all have over how we discuss communities that we not necessarily know much about. And what it did to me, at least, is theology aside, is it made me realize that there is so much wrong that happens against, for example, the queer community. But equally, I've had people reach out to me from that community who've said that don't let this be used as an avenue for Islamophobia to actually grow. That actually we have a fight towards justice and we're behind you. So I even had individuals from that community come to support me and say, this guy's not homophobic. That this, whatever was sent within a context which is very difficult to explain it until, within a short while. But nonetheless, I do regret what was said and I wish I hadn't said it.
What happened to me? How long have you got? I was an outstanding teacher, very successful in my career, on a trajectory to become a head teacher. I was a head of modern foreign languages, leading an outstanding department in an outstanding school. Everything was rosy.
What was the school?
Parkview School at the time, now name changed to Brockwood Academy. And I got, because of this massive wider political agenda, I got caught up and, got suspended from my job, got sacked, ended up having a trial, a hearing, which led to me being banned for life from teaching. It ruined me.
What were you banned for?
There was numerous allegations. The wider allegation, the umbrella allegation was that there was an undue religious influence from a group of teachers, governors, a plot, but then nobody proved that there was a plot, because a plot is where people get together in a room and they plan something and they plan a strategy and there's certain steps to do things. This was never proven. So I was supposedly part of this plot to take over schools, and I was just a pawn in a bigger scheme of things, to be honest with you. And I was made into a scapegoat, a sacrificial lamb. I was one of the first teachers. I was the second teacher, actually, the first in Parkview Education Trust to be banned for life.
What did you specifically get banned for life for? What was the accusation? Like anything specific, or was it just generally you're trying to Islamize the school or something?
Yeah, the main allegation for everybody involved was an undue religious influence. Right. Too much Islam was being promoted. Within that, everybody had different allegations. So, a few of my allegations were, for example, that I delivered overly religious assemblies. Another allegation was that I didn't teach about contraception whilst delivering sex education lessons back in 2011 to a group of year 10, 15-year-old boys. That I appointed another teacher to become, whilst acting in my role as a governor, an LEA governor at Nansen School, before the school became part of the Parkview Educational Trust. So before the governing body was disbanded, I was a governor there, and I appointed somebody who I'd previously worked with, Razwan Faraz, to the position of deputy head teacher. And then because Razwan introduced Islamic assemblies and introduced a space for children to pray, these were things that were approved on the governing body. I was responsible for his actions because he promoted Islam in the school. Therefore, I was part of this sinister plot of appointing Razwan. I'm therefore responsible for his actions, and I got banned for life. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But
Did you get that overturned?
No.
You didn't? So you still can't teach anywhere now?
Also, are you talking about the life ban? So yeah, when I got banned for life from teaching in 2016 February, I took my case to the High Court with the backing of NUT. They were very supportive. They were clear that blatant injustice had been served. So I'm really thankful again to them for their support. So we took the case to the High Court. The hearing happened in June in Birmingham. The verdict was given in the London High Court in October of 2016. and based on procedural impropriety, my life ban was lifted. The judge said, if you read the papers online, that the report, that injustice had been done. Deliberately, disclosure was withheld deliberately from the panel in my hearing. So, in essence, they didn't have a full overview of the case. And because of that, my life ban was lifted. I went back into teaching for a few weeks, only to be told I was banned again by having an IPO, which is an interim prohibition order imposed upon me. So imagine going through that turmoil, the physical, the emotional, the financial impact, and being stuck in this deep black hole, not knowing how to get out, feeling that the whole world is against you, nobody's there for you. It was a very difficult time. But then to fight that, and then to be for my life ban to be lifted was a huge victory, and then to set foot in the classroom was an amazing feeling, only to be told a few weeks later that I was banned again because the leadership hearing that was going on. There were 3 cases: leadership hearing, middle leaders, which was myself, and then teachers hearing. Because their verdict hadn't been given, I was banned again as after the DFE appealed the decision by the judge. So waiting anxiously for that, and then obviously we know what happened with the leadership case when their cases were dropped. I then went back into teaching for about, I think, 6-7 months before I made the decision that this isn't for me, because I was constantly looking behind.
So you are allowed to teach.
Yeah, technically speaking,
you're just not going to go back there now.
Yeah. Technically speaking, I can go back to teaching.
Emotionally, you don't feel.
Yeah, there's too much baggage. I couldn't have the career that I once had. I was a thriving middle leader, hoping to become a head teacher one day. And I do believe that if I was still in that profession, if I was still in that school, on that same trajectory, I probably would have been, applying now for headship.
How did it change your life, Jahangir? What did you do next, and how did you feel? You must have been very, very bitter.
I mean, I had a wonderful 16-year career, up to that point. So in December 2015, when the Secretary of State banned me for life, I was broken. My labour of love, my passion, everything that I had done, after graduating from King's College, reading chemistry, was education and helping the community. I was well travelled. I travelled the country. I was a school inspector. I was a school improvement consultant. I was a qualified science teacher. I'd led science departments with excellent results. I was the head of maths with some of the best results in the country. I became a deputy head at Old Know Academy. We were thriving. I had a brilliant career. I loved it. I wanted to give back to my community. I lost everything. Financially, it damaged me. It damaged my reputation. It damaged my credibility. I became very unemployable. Nobody wanted to know. Many committees and many organisations that I used to work for ostracised me, almost immediately. Shockingly, I was never interviewed by Peter Clark, but or by his team. But unfortunately, I was, affiliated with that report, and as a result, I was just kind of left, on my own in turmoil. Really, it creates. People don't see it because it's such a private thing, but it had a detrimental impact on me and my family. I was thriving. I was at the top of my game. I was giving everything I can to Old Know Academy. Surprisingly, in Old Know Academy, we were the only school out of all the Trojan Horse schools that maintained our outstanding in teaching and learning and our achievement. We managed to get the best ever SAT results in that year, in May 2014. So I was very proud, and I never wanted to jump ship. During the Trojan Horse, many schools around the country rang me, headhunted me to be a head teacher or be a deputy head, take on another role in another school. But I never jumped. I didn't want to just leave Old Know Academy in that state. So, I did nothing wrong. I had nothing to worry about. So I thought, I'm just going to carry on, and I did. So, and I was more than happy. I've got no regrets. As an acting head teacher, we're all prone to mistakes. We're all human. We're all, I was mentoring head teachers. I was in the process of academizing other schools. I was mentoring NQTs, middle managers. I was working with the DFE at the time to academize local schools. and they had actually wanted myself to support them in many initiatives, so, and I know the same with Parkview, with Tahir Alam and his team. So it was, so we were doing really well, and it was, so I didn't want to just jump ship, and I wasn't going to do that, so, and we do make mistakes, and we learn from them, but I didn't do anything that needed me to be banned for life. I don't believe I met that threshold.
It's very hard to express in such short, such succinctly that when you have your purpose taken away from you, and when you're impacting society in a way and your own community in a way that you see tangible growth in how they are in this country, and you'd have that taken away from you, and then lies told, and a flurry of news articles and news items coming out, it completely broke me as a person. It severed many relationships. I lost total confidence in the Muslim community. In fact, at a time, there was a period of which this was one major factor, when I myself and others were abandoned by Muslim organizations, MCB, and the likes. When we were abandoned by them, when we turned to them for help and they didn't give it, I lost all hope in Muslims. I, in fact, for a brief while left Islam and had to rekindle what it meant to be a Muslim because of that.
Literally, they wouldn't help you. I mean, perhaps it's not fair to name names because they're not here to defend themselves, but generally you feel let down by Muslims.
Yeah, 100%. I think in terms of, I can, if anybody was to come to me and question what I'm saying about any of the major Muslim organizations, we felt totally abandoned. Nobody approached us. Nobody came to ask us for help. When we approached them and asked, they said, we can't help you because we would be tarnished with the same brush. And these are all the major players, every single one of them.
And you had a crisis of faith.
Yeah.
Mentally it was really tough. I started to develop severe headaches, dizzy spells. I would fall over. In this very same room, I fell over so many times. I developed insomnia, put on weight. I struggled to eat. I was just newly married. It impacted our relationship with my family and others. I was here, I was present. I was here, but I wasn't present, if you know what I mean. And it was just difficult to kind of, process everything because it was happening so quickly. I was going through this struggle, but at the same time, I had to remain sane and logical and composed and fight my court hearing at the same time and write letters and emails and answer for myself. But it was difficult. Then the financial impact, having a middle class salary, having ambitions to move into a better area, a bigger home, starting a family, all of those things collapsed and they were put on hold. The emotional impact is still there. I still break down sometimes and I think about what happened. And, when I'm triggered, it's really difficult. Like today, I knew when I was going to speak to you, just the last couple of days, I've been quite anxious. When you met me, I wasn't in a good space. I was feeling quite ill. I felt like vomiting. I had a severe headache. But at the same time, I know that I have to face this reality because I'm not going to hide away. But it's not easy for me to talk about this because, I haven't had closure until we don't get that government inquiry, until there's no apology, until there's no some sort of compensation. How can there be closure?
Are you bitter? 5 years on, whatever it is, are you bitter?
I'm not bitter, I'm hurt. Because as I mentioned, the wounds haven't healed. You can forgive, but you can't forget. And end of the day, until I breathe my last, I'm going to continue fighting. However long it takes, whatever it takes, within the resources that are at my disposal, we'll do whatever we can to just, change the narrative at least. If we can change the narrative and we can make somebody else's life a little bit easier and people can take heat from this or seek some comfort and strength from our story and what we went through and how we're trying to fight back now, for me, that's something.
Have you been able to kind of Islamically or spiritually kind of find any meaning in what happened to you? Because on the face of it, you were shafted, right? And you lost so much. 5 or 6 years on, do you think Allah did it for a reason? Put that through you that?
Yeah, look, absolutely. We know that part of our faith is that we are going to be tested in this dunya, and Allah tests people differently, and everybody's test is different. Nobody's test is bigger than anybody else's. We all have a journey. And one thing that gave me comfort was Allah does not test somebody with more than they can bear. And having that tawakkul in Allah that your life will change, and having that faith was the key for me to get through this, and not giving up, because Allah doesn't like somebody that lacks hope. Allah likes somebody that believes that there is hope, that there is light at the end of the tunnel. I know it's a cliche, but it's true. And alhamdulillah, my life has moved forward. I'm doing bigger and better things now, alhamdulillah, serving humanity, working in the humanitarian sector. But it was a test, and I was tested big time. My family was tested in so many different ways I can't even explain to you. It was hard. Well, alhamdulillah, here I am. I'm breathing, I'm alive, I'm grateful to the Almighty, because there's still 1 billion people worse off than me.
Jahangir, what do you hope comes out of this? I mean, this podcast, it's been widely listened to all over the world now. It's making quite a noise. But is it just going to be all talk for a few weeks and it's going to fade away? What do you hope? Do you hope that anything practical comes out of this?
I think it's reignited that pain. It's reignited that passion, for us to get justice, for us to, get justice. People have got to be held accountable. We were an outstanding academy. If you look at Parkview and if you look at Oldknow, both of these academies were outstanding. We were both at the peak. We were both requested by the government to extend our services far and beyond Birmingham. So, we need an inquiry. There's got to be an inquiry. There's got to be an investigation. There's got to be a judicial review. I want my ban lifted, and I want to still fight for that. So, you mentioned global. I want the country and the world to know what took place in a democratic country where Muslims are given their lives for. I'm educated. I've contributed so much of my life to modern day Britain, to make it what it is. So when you're ostracized and all of a sudden you're told you're not good for nobody or you're not good for education, it's very hurtful, it's very damaging, and it damages the community overall. So I want the world to know what we went through. I want the world to know that this is left, unaccounted for. It's left unaccountable. There are people out there that, at the ministerial level, at the national, at the local level, at Birmingham City Council, that, have, conducted themselves in such a manner that is brought, damaging effect to the community. So I do really want to see something come off this, and I just hope it's just not a passive, little, episode. I really want something to come out of this.
Definitely more hopeful. I think in terms of what this has done is reinvigorated a sense of hope around this story, because when you've got professional journalists who've pushed through all the barriers and discovered the truth that we've been feeling and waking up to every single night, that how is it our entire lives were disrupted simply because of the faith that we belong to, we're hopeful. I'm certainly very, very hopeful, inshallah, that we can do something with this.
What would redress look like for you?
I think a public apology from the government, from the education establishment. I think in terms of for us, for them to realise that actually there was no merit whatsoever to what was in that letter, and that the course of action then taken by the establishment was entirely wrong. I think, for me, the thing to think about more than anything is what impact has this had upon the children of that time, their children, and future generations, as to how, when they look back and see that there were, teachers of different persuasions, all who happened to be Muslim, and in fact there were pockets of individuals who weren't even Muslim, who were supporting the rise of, children from the Muslim community to look beyond the average that was expected of them, and to rise way above that somehow or another people will think, actually, if we give attention to the faith background of these kids, that we would be seen in a suspicious manner. Because within education circles now, the Trojan Horse is referred to as an actual incident. So you have teachers who are fearful that if they support any children wanting to pray, forget even the idea that, children praying or meditating is positive for them. I mean, I'll give you an example I remember being a governor in a school, and one of the other governors questioned who happened to be from a different faith background, questioned why children need to pray. He said, don't you think that's a bit extreme? And I said to him, well, if children meditated, or if children just took some time out to do some mindfulness or whatever they need to do, what's your thoughts on that? He said, well, I think that's wonderful. I think it's absolutely wonderful that the child is using this space. And I said, well, what is the difference between that and prayer? Why is it that you are suspicious of the activities of Muslims simply by virtue of being Muslim? And so I think there's a huge impact that needs to be considered here as to what direction it's been taking for a long time. I think Trojan Horse was not the beginning of a crime against Muslims. It was a continuation.
What's the legacy of Trojan Horse?
Oof, that's a big question. I think broken communities. As an individual myself, who typically, although I wouldn't label myself as a secular Muslim, but is typically considered as a secular liberal, is what I'm considered among some circles. I've had individuals come to me and say, you as someone from this persuasion of Islam, if you are targeted, then nobody has hope. And I think that in itself paints a very grim picture of the way Muslims are seen, that regardless of how amenable you are as an individual to mainstream, that simply by being Muslim, you are going to be suspicious. And that's the legacy that continues. And what we've got to really think about as a community is, how do we really tackle this and understand that the state does not trust the Muslim?
I mean, look, I've never given up fighting for injustice, and as a Muslim, I firmly believe that one of my values is speaking up for injustice. I mean, I work for a charity and I'm a humanitarian, and we try to become the voice for the voiceless in different countries in the world. So we try to speak for injustices that are happening to them. So in the same way, injustice was done to me and my colleagues, and it's so important for me to carry on the fight, whether it takes 5 years, 10 years. It's almost coming up to 10 years. We've been fighting behind the scenes. I'm more than happy to share my story for people to know what happened to me and the wider impact of Trojan Horse. So,
what does redress look like for you?
A government apology, a government, inquiry. Sorry, a government inquiry for the government to apologise, and of course for us to be given compensation, because the financial impact on us was absolutely huge. I don't want to make this about myself only, but we struggled massively financially, losing your job, your career. I mean, that's the least that can be done, to be honest with you.
What do you think the legacy of the whole Trojan Horse saga is?
The legacy of the Trojan Horse saga is that, that there was this plot by, that people still believe, I believe, in larger parts of society, that there was this plot by Muslims in inner city Birmingham who tried to take over schools. And this informed and policy making, this beefed up counter-terrorism policy, the rise of Prevent, so many things have happened on the back of Trojan Horse. So this is real. It's still used as a case study, I believe. And the narrative needs to change, because it happened to us, but it could happen to other minority communities as well. So therefore, I think it's so important. Whether you're a Muslim or not is irrelevant. Injustice is injustice. So I think whoever's watching this video and who's listened to the podcast, we've got to come together. We've got to unite upon fighting for injustice and making sure another community isn't tarnished in the same way. They don't get ruined in the same way, because if it's happened to us, the same cycle repeats itself. So I want to be that instrument, that voice of change. I'm happy to support, share my story, and together working with people who also want to make a difference. I'm here to make a change, inshallah.
I lost a wonderful career. You lost a wonderful career. So many outstanding Muslims, and even some of our non-Muslim colleagues, who we consider as brothers and sisters, lost their careers. And all for what? A letter that was not corroborated, its authenticity checked, whether it was valid or not. A letter that was, which was referred to as with bogus allegations, can tear our careers, our lives, the entire, our credibility, our reputations apart. I could never fathom, I could never imagine it.
Obviously, this podcast reveals certain things, and it just shocked me to the core. It was devastating listening to it, and just to understand that we were victimized, we were abused, we were, taken advantage of, and destroyed, our lives destroyed.
For being Muslim, yeah?
For being, let's just be honest about it, absolutely. This is a blatant Islamophobic attack. This is, and the root of all of this is Islam, the fear of Muslims. We've seen as a boogeyman, the othering, and Trojan Horse is a clear example of that. One of the biggest scandals in the country, and definitely in the history of education, and how we were used as pawns and manipulated and made into sacrificial lambs. Innocent people. We weren't perfect. Nobody's perfect, but you had a clean record, I had a clean record, never been disciplined ever.
Never.
And suddenly out the blue for this to happen.
Shocking.
And then to find out, obviously, some of the witness statements and their recordings and their perception, it's crazy. So everything you think, and it's clear that these people were influenced by the media, the terminology, what the media was peddling at the time. The loaded language like Islamist plot, jihadist plot, the ignorance of people, our colleagues, is shocking. I just wish that they had come to us and asked us certain questions just to clarify, rather than being afraid and scared and going to the wrong people, thinking that they're there to support them. And in the end, what they said ruined us, really. Because it was, like you said, it was unsubstantiated, not corroborated. How can that be? It was used. It's just shocking that I can't believe that living in England with the justice system that we had, how badly we were screwed. We know that there was a rise of extremism. Children were being manipulated online, joining ISIS, etc. We were the solution, not the problem. They took us out of the system when they needed us the most. And we were there to give back. We were balanced Muslims, proud of being British Pakistani Muslims, proud of being citizens of this country, leading, that balanced life. And we were there to give, not just in the classroom, but being those role models, being that positive influence. I'm from Alam Rock, you know what this area is like. Kids lack role models here.
That's right.
And me and you were taken out along with others out the system. And such a huge loss,
huge loss.
To the education system, to this country, to the children, to the next generations. I just think it's such a shame, isn't it?
I think it's time to put this to an end. And I think those people that were behind the letter, they've got to do the morally right thing, and the most conscious thing to do and the most humblest thing to do is take responsibility, because the Islamophobic witch hunt that followed that letter was a scar on democracy. It was damaging to our efforts to be an integrated, a social, community cohesion community. We're trying to make the best out of all the obstacles that we're facing. And I think it's highlighted that there's a lot more work to be done. But unfortunately, the outcome of this whole Trojan Horse and the narrative that it fed is that it's left Muslims, in a very bad light.
I can't believe it. And how irresponsible and how selfish that person was. They're going to have to pay for that, and we know that Allah is a judge. God is a judge, and if that person doesn't get punished in this life, then we know that Allah will hold everybody to account.